Profound and subtle Dharma is rarely encountered in eons. Now we hear and follow it. May we realize the Tathagata's meaning. To liberate beings, please generate bodhicitta before teaching. We will continue explaining the Mahayana Shurangama Sutra. We are currently discussing the Buddha's 25 great disciples who attained realization by relying on their various different causes and conditions. We have already discussed the 5 faculties, the 6 objects, and the 6 consciousnesses, as well as the 4 or 5 primary elements. We can also say the 7 primary elements. Among the 7 primary elements, the primary element of earth has already been covered. Then the primary element of fire has been covered, but the primary element of water has not yet been explained. Earlier we should have finished the primary element of earth, water, fire, wind, and space. Yes, and also the primary elements of consciousness and perception. Later today we will continue discussing this. There are 5 more disciples in this volume. As for these great masters mentioned later, most of them are in the identity of bodhisattvas. Although they are said to be at the level of arhats, in reality they should have reached the highest levels of learning. We could say they are within the 10 grounds of the Mahayana, in the various states of bodhisattvas. This should be apparent. Now let us continue. We are looking at the primary element of water. Among the 7 primary elements, and among the 25 disciples, the 20th is the pure youth moonlight. The term pure youth actually, just like when we refer to Bodhisattva Manjushri as a pure youth, like the pure youth Manjushri, here it refers to a type of youthfulness in terms of spiritual realization. They can also be called a pure youth. The pure youth moonlight stood up, bowed at the Buddha's feet, and said to him respectfully, "I can remember as many eons ago as there are sand grains in the river Ganges, when a Buddha named Water and Sky was in the world." Here he is saying, at that time the pure youth moonlight, who was also a Dharma prince, stood up from his seat, and after bowing down at the Buddha's feet, he respectfully spoke to the Buddha, saying, "In the past, within my memory, long ago in the past, after as many eons as sand grains in the river Ganges had passed, an exceptionally large number of eons, countless as the sand grains in the Ganges, a Buddha once appeared in the world. This Buddha's name was Water and Sky. Among the 35 Buddhas, there is also the thus come one, Water and Sky. He taught bodhisattvas to enter samadhi through the contemplative practice of insight into the fundamental nature of water. My contemplation was that all the fluids in my body share the same fundamental nature. I began by contemplating saliva and mucus, and then phlegm, stomach acid, marrow, blood, urine, excrement, and so forth. In all the fluids that circulate through my body, my contemplation was that the fundamental nature of water is the same. The Buddha taught him this. He taught the bodhisattvas to practice water contemplation. Sometimes we practice fire contemplation, and sometimes impurity contemplation. Sometimes wind contemplation, and sometimes space contemplation. Sometimes it is guru contemplation. The methods of contemplation are all different. There are also many such methods in our current practices, including within our Dzogchen teachings. Sometimes we contemplate the sound of water or the sound of fire. The yoga of the 4 elements also has such practices. Therefore here, this Buddha requested these bodhisattvas to primarily practice water contemplation and enter into such a samadhi. Indeed, the guiding methods of the Buddhas and bodhisattvas differ, just as the capacities of sentient beings are different. After studying the Shurangama Sutra this time, everyone should realize that if something differs from your own tradition or your own method of practice, please absolutely do not slander it.
For example, if you follow this particular Dharma method, studying the great perfection which is highly valued, but if someone else is studying other traditions, then you should also rejoice. Otherwise, perhaps because you do not practice water contemplation, you might go and say your water contemplation is of no use. Saying something like that is actually slandering the Buddha Dharma. So how did he contemplate? He contemplated that the fundamental nature of all the water in the body does not conflict with itself. Not conflicting means they do not clash with each other. There is no collision, no mutual restraint. With water, as everyone knows, the fundamental nature of water is entirely moist, none of it conflicts with another. Fire and water, on the other hand, conflict with each other, but the nature of water is completely non-conflicting. Then, starting from within our bodies, the mucus in the nose, the saliva in the mouth, and all these fluids within the body, phlegm, stomach acid, marrow, blood, urine, excrement, all the things that belong to the liquid category, fluids that circulate through the body, flowing out from the body, or circulating and flowing within the body. For these fluids, regardless of whether they are clear or cloudy, or some are thicker and some are thinner, some are clean and some are dirty, no matter what they are like, the fundamental nature of water is the same. In terms of the fundamental nature of water, they are completely identical. I saw too that the water inside my body is not different from the water outside my body, even as far away as the fragrant seas of the royal floating banner lands. The fundamental nature of water is one and the same. So seeing the fluids in one's own body, the clean and the unclean, including one's saliva and all the other bodily fluids, and then the water outside in the world, the water in our valleys, the water in the oceans, up to the Buddhas. This is the flower bank world. The flower bank adorned world is called the royal floating banner lands. Of the royal floating banner lands, all the water in these fragrant seas, including the fragrant seas in the land of ultimate bliss, or the fragrant seas in the land of the unmoving Buddha, their essence, from the perspective of their identical liquid nature, has no difference whatsoever. At this stage, when I was first striving to perfect this contemplation, I was aware of only the water in my body, although I still understood that I had a body. So just now, the pure youth Moonlight, when he first began, he also contemplated in this way. Everything was also of the fundamental nature of water. Actually, whether we study the Abhidharma Kosha or the Yogacarabhumi Shastra, sometimes when practitioners meditate, everything truly transforms into water. Ultimately, within the practitioner's realm of experience, everything genuinely becomes water. There is indeed this kind of water contemplation. Including in some practices of the Shravakayana, there is also this kind of method. After he initially practiced this water contemplation, eventually this practice was perfected. Once it was perfected, he could observe everything, the world inside and out, including his own body, all turning into water. In this state, he was aware of only the water, with nothing else besides water. Such a state does exist, although I still understood that I had a body. But at that time, his realization of emptiness was not yet ultimate. The understanding that his own body is also completely empty had not yet been reached. He still treated his body as an entity with the nature of water, clinging to it as a physical form completely filled with water. Or he saw the entire external world as fully permeated by water. However, this water was still perceived as existing upon some physical substance. Therefore, the selflessness of persons and the selflessness of phenomena were not yet fully and completely realized as emptiness at that time. Next, he shared a personal story. I was a monk at the time, and once when I was sitting quietly in my room, a young disciple of mine peeked into the room through a window, seeing nothing but water in the room. At that time, as the pure youth Moonlight was contemplating water, while he was contemplating, he was a monk, enclosed in his own room, sitting quietly in meditation, contemplating water. At this time a disciple of mine, who was perhaps very mischievous, peeked in through the window. He secretly looked inside, and when he looked, nothing could be seen in the room. He only saw clear water everywhere. The entire room was completely a vast expanse of water. Besides this, he saw nothing else at the time, because he was entirely focused on water contemplation. That's why it is the same for others. Just like the disciple of Bodhisattva Nagarjuna in the past, who contemplated having horns on his head, as told in the flight of Garuda, eventually others could also see it. Finally, he was told to contemplate not having horns, and so he continuously contemplated again. In the end, the horns disappeared. Therefore, with this water contemplation, if one's practice is relatively advanced, it is definitely achievable. For some of us, no matter how much we contemplate water, we might just get thirstier. It's not guaranteed. We might not even be able to visualize a single drop of water. Then at this moment, when the disciple saw nothing else, the Bodhi in his ignorance took up a small piece of tile and tossed it into the water. It hit the water with a splash. He skipped away, looking back over his shoulder. At that time, this ignorant youth, generally speaking, a youth refers to a child between 8 and 15 years old. This ignorant child was quite mischievous. He took up a small piece of tile and tossed it into the water. At this point he thought, is it really water? Had his eyes deceived him? Or was it some kind of mirage? Or was it an illusion? He saw that the practitioner wasn't inside either. It was entirely a sea of water. In that case, what exactly is it? Children usually act this way. So he grabbed a stone or a piece of tile and tossed it into the water. At this moment it made a splashing sound in the water. Then he thought, oh, it really is water. He probably looked around here and there and then skipped away, looking back over his shoulder. Because he was a bit scared, wondering if anyone saw him, climbing up to the window and throwing a stone, he just ran back. As I emerged from samadhi, I felt a sharp pain in my heart. It was like the pain Sariputra felt upon encountering a hostile ghost. At that time, after the pure youth moonlight emerged from samadhi, he felt something was wrong. Suddenly his heart ached terribly. Actually, spiritual practice can sometimes be quite extraordinary. It was akin to when Sariputra, who was also in meditation, was harmed by a hostile ghost. This incident is discussed briefly in some commentaries, but in the Ekottara Agama it is explained in more detail. At that time Sariputra was at Vulture Peak. He entered the Vajra Samadhi, and as he was in Samadhi, there came, it seems they were from the 4 great kings, 2 messengers of the northern heavenly king. As they passed by, these 2 heavenly beings or ghosts, one of them, a hostile ghost, wanted to harm Sariputra. He said, I want to smack him hard. He couldn't stand the sight of him. Actually, Sariputra hadn't done anything. Sometimes non-human beings, they are very strange. He hadn't done anything, he was just meditating, but the ghost couldn't stand it. Perhaps he carried a malicious mind from beginningless time. Then the other ghost told him, You'd better not. Sariputra is very powerful. His power could split Mount Sumeru in half. If you do that, you're definitely doomed. You'd better not do it. He replied, I'm not afraid. I am also very powerful. In the end, he used his fist to strike Sariputra. While Sariputra was meditating, he hit Sariputra's head, with his fist. But Sariputra remained completely unmoving. Later, it seems that the other ghost from earlier said, If you strike him, I'm leaving. And that ghost asked, Are you afraid of Sariputra? Yes, I am indeed afraid. Then if you really want to strike him, I will leave in advance. And he left. Later, when that other hostile ghost struck him for the ghost himself, the earth split open, and he immediately fell into hell. He fell alive right into hell. Later, after Sariputra emerged from samadhi, he had a bit of a headache. Why does my head ache? Then, when he went to the Buddha finally told him, it was because a ghost, a hostile ghost, harmed you, struck your head. You just didn't know it because you were in samadhi. That was the reason. So he referenced here the story mentioned in the Ekottara Agama about Sariputra. It was like the pain Sariputra felt upon encountering a hostile ghost. Just like a ghost harming him, he also experienced heart pain. I thought to myself, I am already an arhat, and for a long time I have not created any conditions that would lead to illness. How is it then that this pain has arisen in my heart? Does this mean that I have retreated? Here he thought to himself, I have been an arhat for such a long time, and I have never experienced this kind of pain before. Why is it that today, suddenly, I was fine when I entered samadhi, but emerging from samadhi is so painful? My heart hurts terribly. Have I lost my spiritual realization? Have I retreated from the holy fruit? That shouldn't be possible. Why is it like this? At this time he came, at that moment the boy, that mischievous, ignorant boy from earlier, ran up to me. At that moment the boy ran up to me and told me what he had done. He said, when I came here just now there was nothing here, it was all just something like water. I accidentally threw a stone in. At this time the pure youth Moonlight said, I instructed him, when you see the water again, open the door immediately, wade into the water, pick up the piece of tile. The boy listened respectfully to my instructions. And after I had again entered samadhi, he saw the piece of tile in the water exactly as before. He opened the door, removed the tile and went out. I emerged from samadhi, and my body was again free of pain. Actually, I hope that when we teach the Karandavyuha Sutra, for example, if we basically just read it, it takes a bit of effort. I read slowly, and you might get impatient, but if I just explain it directly like this, I should be able to get through it. Maybe this is a bit better, but it's fine anyway. So he told him, later, if you see water in my room again, open the door at that time. After opening it, wade straight into the water. If the piece of tile you tossed in is there, it's best you throw it out. The boy followed the instructions. Later, when he entered samadhi, the boy saw the water once again. This time he didn't. If he were mischievous, he might have tossed another one. Then the pure youth Moonlight's heart would have hurt even more. But that child wasn't really bad. He was obedient. He still saw that piece of tile exactly as before. Then, after opening the door, he threw the stone out. After he threw it out, when the pure youth Moonlight emerged from samadhi, his body had recovered back to normal. This describes his water contemplation at that time. His water contemplation reached such a state. Actually, some other commentaries also mention, for instance, some masters contemplate fire, and after contemplating fire, the entire mountain is ablaze. Everything is a sheet of flames. There are cases like this. And if contemplating space, the whole world turns into an expanse of space. Everything turns into this. So generally, if the yoga of the four elements is accomplished, it will be like this. Milarepa's biography also tells why Milarepa could not be burned by fire, or washed away when thrown into the water, or killed when thrown off a cliff. Much of the reason is that he actually gained mastery over the yoga of the four elements. This is the reason he gained mastery. Next it says, I met countless Buddhas, tasso. At length, when the thus come one royal self-mastery and spiritual powers vast as mountains and seas was in the world, my body vanished. Later he passed before countless thus come ones, practicing continuously like this, practicing continuously, until he reached the thus come one royal self-mastery and spiritual powers vast as mountains and seas. This thus come one was also very powerful, turning nothing into something, large into small, the infinite into one into the infinite, and so on, able to manifest all kinds of mastery and spiritual powers. He attained mastery in ocean-like spiritual powers, such a thus come one. So at this time, when he finally came before this thus come one, only then did he finally completely dissolve his attachment to this body. He attained the true bodhisattva state of the selflessness of phenomena. Then the fundamental nature of the water in my body and of all the waters of the fragrant seas and worlds throughout 10 directions merged into true emptiness, so that they were one and the same, without the slightest difference. At that time all the water in the 10 directions, inside and out, merged in its fundamental nature. The fundamental nature of all water is entirely empty, and emptiness and appearance are one and the same. At that time actually attaining realization through the nature of water, this is also if we truly observe, for example, a cup of water, a drop of water, or using this nature of water, the nature of all water, inside and outside the body is the same. This nature of water is actually unestablished. When we slowly observe a drop of water, emptiness is form, form is emptiness. When we observe with this kind of power, the essence of water is indeed non-existent. Therefore, through this kind of practice, the world turns into water, and water turns into emptiness. Emptiness turns into the inseparable luminosity of the Tathagata Garbha. Such a state, one can also attain realization by relying on the primary element of water. Now the Thus Come One has given me the title Pure Youth, and I have joined the assembly of Bodhisattvas. So today, in the presence of Shakyamuni Buddha, I have received and retained this true title of Pure Youth, and I have had the opportunity to participate in this grand assembly of great Bodhisattvas of the Shurangama. Participating in such a grand assembly in the capacity of a Bodhisattva is a matter of great joy. He must have felt this way as he described his state of enlightenment. The Buddha asked how we broke through to enlightenment. I understood that water as it flows and circulates, and so I understood how to be patient when no mental objects arise. My enlightenment was perfected. This is the best method. If the Buddha asks me what the ultimate cause of Bodhi is, for me, I would definitely answer that it is the fundamental nature of water. Because the fundamental nature of water, as I just mentioned, all water is moist in nature. It is circulating, it is flowing smoothly, but the fundamental nature of water is also empty. So for me, by relying on it, I attain the patience when no mental objects arise, and ultimately the fruit of perfected Bodhi was also attained by relying on it. Therefore, for me, among all practices, the primary element of water should be the best. In his spiritual practice, the primary element of water, for him, he probably has a deep affection for the primary element of water. We could say it like this. I don't know if bodhisattvas have the same kind of worldly affections as we do, but at the very least, for example, our Guru, His Holiness, he had a very strong attachment to Mipham Rinpoche's direct showing of the nature of mind, a very strong attachment, including another text by Mipham Rinpoche, Crucial Instructions on Trekcho. His Holiness used lapis lazuli colored blue paper and wrote it down with gold, and then always kept it placed right in front of him. So from our superficial perspective, these great accomplished masters certainly have no attachments, but in their manifestation toward their own gurus, their own dharma practices, and the causes, conditions, and places of their enlightenment, they will have some emotional connection. I think many of you are the same. If you attain realization at Larungar, you will definitely never forget Larungar in the future. The water here, the mountains here, the space here, the vegetation here, and so on, what they mean to me, even when recalling the name of this place, there will be a different kind of feeling. If you didn't receive any blessings here, didn't experience any spiritual response, not even a little bit of anything, you might think upon arriving there, that place is too. I really suffered there. Truly, that year, my health was poor, my mood was bad, I was tortured to death. Now I am doing quite well. Truly, everyone's causes and conditions are different. The same goes for gurus. If, under a certain Dharma master, a certain Khenpo, a certain Khenmo, or in a certain place, you truly receive the grace of the Dharma, the nourishment of the Dharma, then in that case, you will not forget it for all your lifetimes. You will feel immense gratitude and be filled with deep emotion. If you didn't gain anything, you might say, Alas, at that time, that person really wasted my time. He just engaged in empty talk every day. Wow, whenever I think of that person now, I hate him. If I had the chance, I'd want to beat him up. This shows that everyone's causes and conditions are truly different. We can clearly see this. Then the 21st disciple, the one who attained realization through the primary element of wind, is the Dharma Prince Brilliance of lapis lazuli. He stood up, bowed at the Buddha's feet, and said to him respectfully, "I can remember when a Buddha named Infinite Voice was in the world, as many eons ago as there are sand grains in the river Ganges. I can remember when a Buddha named Infinite Voice was in the world. He also stood up from his seat, bowed at the Buddha's feet, and addressed the Buddha. I can remember in the past, after as many eons had passed, as there are sand grains in the river Ganges, a Buddha named Infinite Voice, thus come one, appeared. His voice is also related to the primary element of wind. We know that generally any sound is transmitted through the wind. Otherwise, if there were no wind, any sound would be impossible. So his name is also related to this realization. He taught bodhisattvas that the wondrous understanding which is our original enlightenment may be attained by making this contemplation. The world and beings' bodies are unreal phenomena that are made to move by the power of the primary element, wind. At that time, the Dharma Prince Brilliance of lapis lazuli must have been a bodhisattva. At that time he gave teachings to us bodhisattvas. When giving the teachings, he spoke of the wondrous understanding which is our original enlightenment, the luminous, wondrous enlightenment of the Tathagata Garbha. He taught us, and while teaching he said, whether contemplating this world or contemplating the bodies of sentient beings, whether contemplating the vessel world or the bodies of the sentient world, actually all these things, absolutely everything, are a kind of unreal condition, the conditions of this deluded grasping. We often say it is the stirring of primal ignorance. Because of its stirring, the entire vessel world and the sentient world manifest. Earlier in the wish-fulfilling treasury, it also explains that from the original ground, the ground manifestation appears, then the first ignorance arises, then it manifests outwardly and inwardly. Ultimately, the outward manifestation becomes the vessel world and the sentient world. Inwardly, it is the individual's own, including afflictions, arising thoughts, as well as one's entire mind and mental factors, etc., are all manifested. So at that time, such unreal conditions were entirely made to move by the power of the stirring wind. At that time, this Buddha felt that everything relied on the wind. In our world, some experts, for example, if I specialize in studying wind, when I talk about wind, I definitely have a lot to say. If I specialize in studying the primary element of fire, then there will certainly be, it goes without saying for the Buddha, his primary pith instruction for guiding disciples. If it was the primary element of wind, then he would definitely use this method to explain. Actually, no matter what, the Shurangama Sutra really explains it very well. I feel that, especially for us now, whose conceptual and deluded thoughts are very strong, for instance, Westerners like logic, they can also, through this method of explanation, everyone might not have anything to argue against. You see, whether it is the stirring nature of wind or the moist nature of water, these are things one has to acknowledge. In any era, this is something we cannot deny. Therefore, explaining it through this approach is something many people should find very acceptable. I hope that many of our Dharma friends will put more effort into the Shurangama Sutra in the future. If you have the conditions to propagate the Buddha Dharma, it should be very good. Of course, you might need to have slightly higher wisdom, otherwise the words and meanings inside might not flow very smoothly. When you listen, it seems like there are no problems. But listening and teaching are a bit different. When listening, sometimes you doze off, sometimes conceptual thoughts arise. Sometimes, if you are focused, basically an hour passes by very quickly. But when teaching, there are so many people below, constantly watching and listening. If you explain it correctly, no one will nod. If you make even a slight mistake, many people, Like in British Parliament meetings, many people, when the Prime Minister is speaking below, most people below shake their heads like this, meaning his viewpoint is incorrect, right? So for us to teach, it is indeed a bit difficult when you explain something slightly incorrectly. People below will shake their heads like this. What I meant just now is to teach this, you might need a bit of wisdom. It doesn't have to be too high. If you have a little, you can still teach it. I cannot expand too much. Otherwise, there is quite a lot of content today. Accordingly, I contemplated how the world is established. I contemplated how time moves through it. I contemplated how my body moves and then is still, and how thoughts move in my mind. I understood that all these movements are fundamentally identical. None of them is different from the others. At that time, this Buddha told him that the origin of the entire vessel world and sentient world is wind, stirring. At that time, I also began my contemplative practice. How did I contemplate? First, I observed the establishment of the vessel world, the 10 directions outside, east, south, west, north, the 4 intermediate directions up and down. The establishment of the worlds in the 10 directions is indeed related to wind, related to stirring. Then I contemplated the movement of time, the time of the 3 times, future, past, and present. Within time, earlier it was world and boundary, we observe time and space. From the perspective of time, this is also stirring, this time is constantly flowing. Then I contemplated my own body, whether moving forward or backward, walking, standing, sitting or lying down. Absolutely everything, whether moving or still, everything is also related to the wind. Then I contemplated the arising, dwelling, changing and ceasing of our own minds, the continuous arising of thoughts. Observing this, it also has a certain relationship with the wind. So all movements, ultimately, when observing them, actually, in terms of movement's own fundamental entity, the wind is also nothing. Stirring and wind do exist in manifestation. But in reality, when observing the fundamental entity of the primary element of wind, when observing the fundamental entity of stirring, nothing is established at all. Thus, all these movements are fundamentally identical, none of them is different from the others. All the arising thoughts of the vessel and sentient worlds, all the arising thoughts, all the stirring, ultimately, they are all empty in nature. There is nothing truly real. Therefore, for him to attain realization relying on the primary element of wind was also very easy. On the surface, indeed, everything stirs. But this fundamental entity of stirring also does not exist, including the movement of our bodies now, the movement of our minds, the movement of the world. If everything is turbulent and unsettled, its fundamental entity is all empty. Sentient beings are very pitiful. I came to understand that it is the nature of all movement to arise from nowhere and to go nowhere. The countless numbers of deluded beings throughout the 10 directions are equally unreal. He said, what did I ultimately realize and discover? The fundamental nature of all these various stirring movements, actually when they come, they have no place they come from. And when they go, there is no place they go to. Therefore, whether it is the worlds as numerous as motes of dust in the 10 directions, or these deluded sentient beings, they are all equally an illusion. If you truly contemplate it, there is not a single real thing. Movement is stirring. The vessel world and the sentient world are both moving. We are also, the mind is moving, the body is moving, speech is moving, everything is moving. But this movement is also completely illusory. It does not exist in reality. In the billion worlds that make up this great system of worlds, beings are indeed like a swarm of mosquitoes trapped in a jar, droning in their confusion, buzzing madly in their confinement. He said, next he used a very good analogy. It is like all the sentient beings within the 3,000 great thousand worlds. Actually, All the sentient beings in the 3,000 great thousand worlds, or we can say all the sentient beings on the globe today, are just like being in a vessel or in a container, filled with hundreds of mosquitoes and gnats, insects, many, many insects, ants, placed in a large dish or something similar. Then they start to make a chaotic noise, chirping and squeaking, or droning, buzzing continuously. They are constantly calling out, but in reality they are in a very narrow, confined space, constantly fighting for fame and profit, hyping each other up, going mad or battling, continuously acting like this. But this way it looks like it really is. I feel this sentence is very much like our world today. Our global world, Russia is over here, America is over here, Britain is over here, then North Korea, Japan and South Korea, Pakistan and so on. They are all buzzing and arguing with each other. But actually they all rely on, it is all driven by a mind of hatred and the stirring of the wind. Truly, sometimes sentient beings are very pitiful. Wasn't there a stampede incident in South Korea a while ago? Speaking of it, people are sometimes very foolish. For the sake of some festival, for the sake of something, in the end, during the stampede, everyone didn't even have a chance to free themselves. Seeing some things, including wars, including engaging in all sorts of activities, when people's minds stir like this, their bodies also move. In the process of this movement, they experience a great deal of suffering, but in reality, the fundamental entity of all this movement does not exist. However, how many people truly understand such a fundamental nature of the primary element of wind? Over 2,500 years ago, the Buddha taught these pith instructions. Then these people, like the Dharma Prince Brilliance of Lapis Lazuli, mentioned here, he realized it like this a very long time ago. But for people around the globe today, how many truly understand it? It is hard to say. After meeting the Buddha Infinite Voice, I was able to be patient when no mental objects arose. My mind opened, and in the east I saw the land of the unmoving Buddha. There I became a Dharma Prince in the service of Buddhas throughout the 10 directions. My body and mind gave forth light that shone through all things without obstruction. He said, after I met the one from earlier, which should be the Buddha Infinite Voice, not long after meeting him, I attained the patience when no mental objects arise. Not long after, he attained this patience when no mental objects arise. When he attained the patience when no mental objects arise, his mind completely opened. He awakened to his true nature, suddenly attaining enlightenment. At that time, he saw the land of the unmoving Buddha in the Eastern world. Then, he probably went to the land of the unmoving Buddha. The unmoving Buddha called him a Dharma Prince. He then began to serve the thus come ones in the 10 directions. At that time the light of his body and mind, the luminosity of his body and mind, actually penetrated without obstruction. The light here doesn't necessarily mean the light our eyes can see. It actually means the luminosity of wisdom is without obstacles. As we discussed earlier, it pervades the Dharma realm, and the fundamental nature of all phenomena has been thoroughly comprehended without obstruction. This is the meaning. The Buddha has asked us how we broke through to enlightenment. I awakened to my enlightened mind through the contemplative insight that the primary element wind has no essential attributes of its own. I entered samadhi, and together with Buddhas throughout the 10 directions, I transmitted the teaching of the wondrous one mind. This is the best method. If the Buddha asks me the cause of Bodhi through my contemplation, I feel that the power of wind is the best. The power of wind ultimately also has no coming or going. In the past, when we went to India, His Holiness also relied on the power of the wind. For over an hour, he heard the verses of praise to Bodhisattva Manjushri. Later, he also asked us to chant them. Therefore, as some practitioners relying on, including in the Great Perfection teachings, relying on going to some mountains to contemplate the sound of the wind, or specially making a personal retreat room for practice, with wind blowing through all 4 sides. Through this, if your house is not very good and lets the wind in, you can contemplate the sound of the wind. Perhaps you might truly attain enlightenment. But nowadays, there doesn't seem to be any. In the past, many of us, during the winter, could see the light from outside inside the house, and could also hear the wind coming in. He said the power of the wind ultimately has no reliance, no entity, and no coming or going. Through this, he truly awakened to the enlightened mind. Then he entered into this unmoving samadhi, devoid of any stirring. Then together with the thus come ones of the 10 directions, ultimately he was also transmitted a deeply penetrating yoga, where the fundamental entity of wind is contemplated as empty. This is how he attained realization. Therefore, for him, the primary element of wind should be the most important in spiritual practice. This Shurangama Sutra, for one, regarding the preceding 6 faculties, 6 consciousnesses, 6 objects, and also the 7 primary elements, it provided a very detailed analysis of the fundamental entity, function, and principle of each one. Then the experiences of how each of these great disciples attained enlightenment are also explained to us. Actually, for us, if our spiritual practice is truly a bit better, and we pray to the Guru and the 3 jewels, the causes and conditions for practice are everywhere. We interact with earth, water, fire, and wind every day. We engage with the eye, ear, nose, tongue, and body every day. We encounter form, sound, smell, taste, and touch every day. Therefore, spiritual practice should be in the present moment. In the past, whether it was practitioners of tantric teachings or practitioners of the Zen school, actually enlightenment is in the present moment. Whenever any phenomenon appears in the present moment, by contemplating its original face, one awakens right then and there. This is a pith instruction for enlightenment used by many great masters throughout history. So we too, according to the perspective of the Shurangama Sutra, the so-called realization is not sought outside the mind. It should be in the present moment, including the surroundings of our own physical bodies. All possess the causes and conditions to attain enlightenment. Moreover, this is also through analysis. It's not that others have it and you don't. It is not like that. Earth, water, fire, and wind, everyone has them. Eye, ear, nose, tongue, and body, everyone has them. Form, sound, smell, taste, and touch, everyone has them, but unfortunately many of us don't know how to do it. Actually, later on, many great masters of the past basically attained realization by relying on different causes and conditions. If we understand the Shurangama Sutra, and then you go look at those great masters of the Zen school who attained enlightenment, maybe they also had some pith instructions from their gurus, or perhaps they had some, but their causes and conditions at that time should be quite similar to the causes and conditions of the 25 great disciples mentioned here. There are many similarities and some differences as well. Next, we will discuss the 22nd disciple, the Bodhisattva Matrix of Space. The Bodhisattva Matrix of Space stood up, bowed at the Buddha's feet, and said to him respectfully, "When the Thus Come One and I were with the Buddha light of Samadhi, my body became infinite. Then 4 great and precious pearls that I held in my hands illuminated countless Buddha lands throughout the 10 directions, and I saw that all these lands were as empty as space." The Bodhisattva Matrix of Space, just by hearing his name, we know that he has a deep affinity for space. For some of us, by looking at the name, we can also understand their inclinations, right? The Bodhisattva Matrix of Space also stood up from his seat, bowed at the Buddha's feet, and respectfully said, "In the past, together with the Thus Come One. This Thus Come One might be Shakyamuni Buddha. I went before the Buddha light of Samadhi and attained an infinite body." In some other sutras it says, "My body is space." The Bodhisattva Matrix of Space said, "My body is identical with space." The Buddha light of Samadhi is the ancient Buddha we often refer to as the Buddha blazing lamp. The Bodhisattva Matrix of Space, in the presence of this Thus Come One light of Samadhi, realized that his own body had no difference from space. Space is boundless, and his body also became boundless. Right now our bodies have boundaries, they have a top and a bottom. We feel there is an inside and an outside, just like this. But at that time he awakened to the truth that space is identical to the body. That is the principle he realized. At that time, holding 4 great and precious pearls in his hands. As for the 4 great and precious pearls, some explain them as precious vessels representing that the 4 primary elements are empty. They are hand emblems symbolizing the emptiness of the 4 elements, because if earth, water, fire and wind are all empty, actually the 5th element is space. There are others, including Master Jiaoguang, who explain it as self-emptiness, phenomena-emptiness, the emptiness of both, and true emptiness. Using the 4 emptinesses, he explains it through the emptiness of self and phenomena. There is also this kind of explanation. Regardless of how it is explained, he used such an emblem of emptiness to eliminate the worlds in the 10 directions, as numerous as dust motes. All phenomena with form were completely transformed into space. The Bodhisattva matrix of space relied on his emblem. For these precious pearls, some literally interpret them as actual precious pearls. Others say they represent a kind of wisdom. It is a wisdom realizing that the 4 elements are all empty, illuminating the world, causing the entire world to transform into space. Therefore, regarding some of the principles we discussed last year concerning the realization of emptiness, praying to the Bodhisattva matrix of space is very excellent. Moreover, regarding the Bodhisattva matrix of space, his biography also mentions that his best method for guiding sentient beings is often to teach about space. Therefore, perhaps many lineage masters of the Great Perfection also have a connection with the Bodhisattva matrix of space. They often directly point out space and contemplate space. Indeed, space is very important. When we teach the Prajnaparamita Sutra, we also contemplate space. When contemplating space, we rely on the outer metaphor of space. This includes what we call outer space. Then regarding inner space, we practice a kind of contemplation based on the channels. This is called inner space. In the Great Perfection, as for secret space, it refers to the inherent, original awareness within one's own mind. These are called outer space, inner space, and secret space. There are many pith instructions regarding this space, so after illuminating the world, everything is completely pervaded by this space. Then my mind was like a great flawless mirror, in which there shone 10 kinds of subtle, wondrous, magnificent lights that illuminated all 10 directions to the ends of space. Later, at that time, the Bodhisattva matrix of space within his own mind manifested the great mirror-like wisdom. This is equivalent to our 8th consciousness transforming into the great mirror-like wisdom. Because the great mirror-like wisdom is the root of all wisdom, his own mind transformed into the great mirror-like wisdom. Then the great mirror-like wisdom radiated 10 kinds of subtle, wondrous, magnificent lights. Magnificent lights refers to the radiance of wisdom. As for 10 kinds, some commentaries explain them as the 10 powers of the Buddha. The 10 powers are actually also 10 kinds of wisdom. The light of 10 kinds of wisdom manifested. Then it radiated into the worlds throughout the 10 directions, ultimately reaching the very ends of space, becoming like this. First, the inner mind transformed into the great mirror-like wisdom. The wisdom of the great mirror-like wisdom, relying on these 10 kinds of radiant light, pervaded the space of the 10 directions. All the royal banner lands were reflected in this mirror, and thereupon were drawn into my body, since my body was the same as space without conflicting with it. His method of contemplation is quite complex. Then, as we just mentioned, the worlds of the thus come ones of the royal banner lands, and the radiance from their worlds entered into the great mirror-like wisdom from earlier. Finally, they were drawn into his own body. Then his own body became non-dual and identical with space. They mutually had no obstruction whatsoever. I became skilled in entering an infinite number of lands, in which I did the great work of the Buddhas and developed a great power to respond to beings in accord with what they require. Then he could also use his own body to enter into Buddha lands as numerous as dust motes. He performed the great works of the Buddhas, making offerings above and giving charity below, liberating sentient beings. And then, complying with this kind of practice, he could perform great vast activities to benefit sentient beings, which appear to be like a dream or an illusion. This great spiritual power arose through my attentive contemplation that the first four primary elements have no essential attributes of their own, that they come into being and cease to be as a result of deluded acts of mind, and that space and the lands of the Buddhas are one and the same, no different at all. He said, this kind of great spiritual power of the Bodhisattva matrix of space, actually, when I observed it closely, the four truths transformed into space, and there was nothing. Moreover, all the arising and ceasing of deluded thoughts, all these phenomena of the vessel and sentient worlds, are non-dual and identical with space. Therefore, they are entirely of the same essence as the Buddha's enlightenment. In terms of purity, they are non-dual and identical with the pure Buddha lands and space. The impure 5 aggregates and 18 sensory realms, these also have no difference from space. It was through this contemplation that I understood, and I learned to be patient when no mental objects arise. When this state of non-duality between luminous wisdom and emptiness manifested, he attained the patience when no mental objects arise. For the Bodhisattva matrix of space, this was a vast mutual contemplation with space. Through his own wisdom, he entered into space, and space also. Furthermore, all the things in the worldly realms entered into his own body. When observing the fundamental nature of his own body and space, there is nothing there either. They are non-dual and identical. Through this method he actually attained realization. Therefore, sometimes, in the Tantric teachings we often contemplate space, contemplate Thogal. Within emptiness we merge our body, mind and eyes completely into it. We frequently abide in a state devoid of any grasping. These practices actually have a definite connection with this patience of non-arising phenomena. The Buddha has asked us how we broke through to enlightenment. I contemplated the boundlessness of space and entered samadhi. In this way my wondrous powers reached a luminous perfection. This is the best method. If the Buddha asks me the cause of Bodhi, using my method of contemplation, then certainly space is the best. Space is boundless. By entering into such a samadhi of boundless space, the Buddha's wondrous powers reach luminous perfection. The original, non-dual manifestation of luminosity and emptiness of the Tathagata Garbha naturally manifests and is naturally realized. Therefore, as for me, space should be considered the very best among all practices. Next we will discuss the Bodhisattva Maitreya, our Bodhisattva Maitreya. This should be, just now we finished explaining the 5 primary elements. Now it should be the primary elements of consciousness and perception. This is the primary element of consciousness. Next, this should be the 23rd disciple. The Bodhisattva Maitreya stood up, bowed at the Buddha's feet, and said to him respectfully, I can recall the time when it was as many eons ago as there are motes of dust. A Buddha named Brilliance of Sun, Moon and Lamp was in the world. Then similarly I stood up from my seat, bowed at the Buddha's feet, and respectfully said, I can recall, after as many eons ago as there are motes of dust in the past, a Buddha named Brilliance of Sun, Moon and Lamp appeared in the world. I entered the monastic life as a disciple of that Buddha. At that time I was deeply preoccupied with a wish to be well known. I enjoyed cultivating friendships with eminent families of the nobility, he said. I had the fortune to enter the monastic life under this thus come one. I had the fortune to become a monk. But the bad part was, I was particularly attached to worldly fame and profit, and I also especially liked associating with, or socializing with whom? Some aristocratic, wealthy and prominent families, those who had money, fame and talent. I particularly liked these people, even after entering the monastic life. Generally, when we enter the monastic life, sometimes it is to benefit sentient beings. It should be like that. But if it's not for the purpose of benefiting sentient beings, indeed, some people constantly pursue those with status and wealth, always chasing after such things, associating with them. However, some of you might think, it's fine, he eventually attained enlightenment anyway. If I also associate with these people, maybe I'll attain enlightenment in the future, but that's not necessarily the case. At that time, his worldly desire for fame and profit was indeed quite heavy. We also see this in the Lotus Sutra. There is specifically someone named Seeker of Fame. His story should be this one. As for the Bodhisattva Maitreya, now he has become the Buddha's successor, but actually in the past during his causal stage, Maitreya was still quite mischievous. He was someone with a relatively strong desire for fame and profit. That world-honored one then taught me to enter samadhi by focusing on a contemplation that all things exist only in consciousness. While in this samadhi I have throughout many eons served as many Buddhas as there are sand grains in the river Ganges, my yearning for fame vanished without a trace. Later, he met the world-honored one, the thus come one, brilliance of sun, moon and lamp from earlier. He taught us to properly let go of everything in the world. All phenomena are created only by the mind, the three realms are only consciousness, and all phenomena are only mind, just like the view of the consciousness-only school. Many sutras also state this. What is the point of your pursuit of fame and profit? It's all created by the mind. It is best for you to let go of all external fame, profit, and all these messy affairs, and focus single-mindedly on contemplating your own mind. Then he guided us to enter samadhi. Like this, throughout many eons for a very long time, relying on this samadhi, he ultimately served Buddhas as numerous as sand grains in the Ganges. Actually, for every bodhisattva during their causal stage of practice, they certainly do not reach the top in a single step. It should be through accumulation over many lifetimes and countless eons. You see, as numerous as sand grains in the Ganges, whether there were truly as many Buddhas as sand grains in the Ganges is hard to say. But there must have been very many thus come ones before whom he continuously accumulated merit, continuously accumulated. Some of us think, I've been here for 3 years now. Why haven't I attained enlightenment yet? I am so anxious. You can also look at bodhisattvas like Maitreya and Bodhisattva eliminating obscurations or Bodhisattva matrix of space. When they talk about their past lives, they accumulated merit little by little over countless eons. It was not just one lifetime. We can talk about it very simply, but within our mind streams there are truly many deep-rooted bad habits. All of these need to be cleared away. For our minds to truly awaken to the right path, it might not be that simple. So sometimes if you cannot sustain your practice, or have no spiritual experiences, or think, I've stayed here for so long and haven't even had a single auspicious dream, I haven't even dreamt of a single yidam deity. But actually what you think about during the day is what you dream about at night. If you are thinking about messy things all day long, then to dream of the guru and yidam without any reason at night is also a bit difficult. If during the day you truly pray with an exceptionally sincere heart, then it will definitely happen. This is a natural manifestation of habits. For some things you shouldn't blame the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. You should blame yourself. Your own mind is constantly on the surface. You are listening, reflecting, and practicing. On the surface you are meditating, but the mind might not be practicing that deeply. As a result, some spiritual experiences are not guaranteed. Then he said, in the presence of Buddhas as numerous as Gangse sand, serving them like this, practicing the samadhi of abandoning all worldly things, and realizing that all phenomena are only mind. After practicing this samadhi, eventually this desire seeking fame and profit vanished completely without a trace. Finally, gradually it disappeared. Eventually, during the time when the Buddha blazing lamp was in the world, I brought to an unsurpassed wondrous perfection this samadhi of consciousness only. I then understood that all the lands of the Buddhas throughout all space, both lands which are partly pure and partly impure, and lands which are entirely pure, exist only within consciousness. Then he continued until the time when the Buddha blazing lamp appeared in the world. Only then did I realize that everything is subtle, wondrous, and perfect, and the mind, the samadhi, that all phenomena are mind only, truly, and finally manifested. He attained realization only after a very, very long time. At this time he saw that throughout the entire space, the purity and impurity within all the Buddha lands, their existence and non-existence, are all manifestations of the transformations of one's own mind. He discovered it was like this. In all the Buddha lands throughout the realm of space, some have both purity and impurity. For example, in our Saha world, there are noble beings and ordinary beings. There are both purity and impurity. Some are only pure without any impurity, just like the Sambhogakaya. Some have neither purity nor impurity, just like the Dharmakaya realms. Some only have impurity and no purity, just like the realms of the lower rebirths. Regarding any principles of having or lacking purity or impurity, he felt they are entirely the transformations of our minds. When the mind is pure, the land is pure. If the mind is defiled, the land is defiled. So the world of each of us is actually a reflection of each person's mind. It is a transformation of it. Just like in our dreams. In a dream, if your health is not good, and your state of mind is not good either, then the dreams you have will all be confused and chaotic. If your mind is very pure like this, then the dream state will also be very pure. Then here he says, world-honored one, because I understood in this way that all things exist only in consciousness. I understood that it is from the true nature of consciousness that all Buddhas come forth. At that time he realized for himself that all phenomena are created only by the mind. Within the fundamental nature of consciousness, infinite thus come ones also appear. Nirmanakayas, Sambhogakayas, Dharmakayas, or within this mind of ours, all the thus come ones of the future, past and present, arise in dependence upon the mind. This should be identical to the view of the consciousness-only school, as explained below. They should be the same. Thus, in accordance with predictions, I have taken my place as the one who will be the next Buddha. Now, during the time of Shakyamuni Buddha, he received this prophecy, or perhaps in the presence of the thus come one mentioned earlier. Here it's probably Shakyamuni Buddha. He received the prophecy to become the Buddha's successor. So you see, these disciples of Bodhisattva Maitreya, including Bodhisattva Asanga, they all love to propagate the consciousness-only school. It is indeed related. He was still even with such early Buddhas back then, he was constantly teaching consciousness only. Therefore, regarding the Yoga Karabhumi Shastra, some say it was composed by Maitreya, while others say it was composed by Bodhisattva Asanga. So texts like the Yoga Karabhumi Shastra explain many of these consciousness-only views inside. Thus, this certainly has a connection with these aspects. The Buddha has asked us how we broke through to enlightenment. I focused on a practice of contemplating that everything in the 10 directions exists only in consciousness. My mind gained perfect understanding, and I understood the true nature of reality. I left far behind any dependence on what is external, and freed myself forever from incessant categorizing. I learned to be patient with a state of mind in which no mental objects arise. This then is the best method. If the Buddha asks me about this perfect penetration, when I observe with wisdom, all phenomena in the 10 directions are nothing but my own mind. Then, when the fundamental entity of the mind reaches perfect luminosity, one enters into the perfected nature. You see, the first point of the consciousness-only school, Actually, even this early on, the three natures of our consciousness-only school were already taught. Then, when entering the perfected nature, one leaves far behind the dependent nature and the imputed nature. At this time, one attains the patience when no mental objects arise. Therefore, for the Bodhisattva Maitreya, this consciousness is very important. Consciousness only, the primary element of consciousness. This consciousness is very important. All phenomena are created by the mind. We should study the consciousness-only school more in the future. Otherwise, when Bodhisattva Maitreya appears in the world to turn the wheel of Dharma, he will definitely have some habits of the consciousness-only school. Therefore, when we studied the commentary on the ornament of the middle way, Mippham Rinpoche also said that as Mahayana practitioners, we must study both the consciousness-only and Madhyamaka teachings. The reason is exactly this. Next is the final one, which we have also discussed before. We covered it back when we discussed the 5 sutras of the Pure Land. It is the chapter on the perfect penetration of Bodhisattva great strength through mindfulness of the Buddha. We have talked about this before. I remember we spent about a whole class on it, so we explained it in quite some detail back then. Today we will just briefly go over it for everyone, which should be fine. This is about attaining realization relying on the primary element of perception. The 24th disciple, the Dharma Prince Great Strength, stood up with 52 Bodhisattva companions. They bowed at the Buddha's feet, and the Bodhisattva Great in Strength said respectfully to the Buddha, "I can recall the time when a Buddha was in the world, as many eons ago as there are sand grains in the river Ganges, named Infinite Light." Bodhisattva Great Strength and his 52 Bodhisattva companions, they stood up together. For Bodhisattva Great Strength, well, sometimes it's one person standing up, sometimes it's 52 standing up, and sometimes even more stand up. Then he bowed at the Buddha's feet and respectfully said this, "I can also recall the time in the past after as many eons had passed as there are sand grains in the river Ganges." A Buddha appeared in the world. This Buddha was called the Infinite Light Buddha. During the eon when this Infinite Light Buddha appeared in the world, 12 thus come ones appeared in succession, and the last of these, the Buddha light surpassing the sun and moon. When the Infinite Light Buddha appeared in the world, actually, 12 thus come ones appeared in succession. They appeared during that same period of time. What was the last Buddha called? The Buddha light surpassing the sun and moon. Some commentaries explain that because in the Infinite Light Sutra, among the 13 names of Infinite Light, when they are explained, Infinite Light is included, as well as light surpassing the sun and moon. Therefore, they should be the names of the same Buddha. It is explained like this. But some commentaries state that although the names are the same, they are actually not the same, thus come one. Because he says that during the time of the Infinite Light Buddha, 12 thus come ones appeared in the world. Then when the last Buddha appeared in the world, it was the thus come one light of sun and moon, including Master Jiaoguang, and some other individual commentaries. There are different explanations regarding this, but looking at it here, it should be, he first said this Buddha's name was Infinite Light, and then 12 thus come ones appeared in the world, and then the last one. In this case, these several Buddhas should probably not be the same thus come one. If they were a single thus come one, it probably wouldn't be phrased this way within a single eon. It would just be explained that he has these various different names, taught me the samadhi of mindfulness of the Buddha. So at that time he taught the samadhi of mindfulness of the Buddha. Nowadays, when many Dharma masters of the Pure Land school propagate the teachings, what we call the samadhi of mindfulness of the Buddha means being mindful of Amitabha Buddha, verbally reciting Amitabha Buddha's name. Actually, mindfulness includes both verbal recitation and mental recollection. However, whether looking at the Tibetan text or its literal meaning, it is recollecting the Buddha. Here it primarily means, of course, reciting the Buddha's name verbally, and then following these words, visualizing in the mind. But generally speaking, When we practice mindfulness of Amitabha Buddha, reciting Amitabha Buddha's name, traditionally, verbally reciting Amitabha Buddha is called mindfulness of Amitabha Buddha. But in true mindfulness of Amitabha Buddha, at that very moment, the mind is thinking of Amitabha Buddha, visualizing Amitabha Buddha. Because for this word mindfulness, there is a mind radical below the present character. It means visualizing right now, in the present moment, within the mind. This is relatively more important. Below he provides two analogies. One is the analogy of two people, and the other is the analogy of a mother and child. First is the first analogy. Consider someone who is always thinking of another person. This second person, though, has completely forgotten about the first person. Even if these two people were to meet, they might as well not have met, and even if they were to catch sight of one another, they might as well not have seen each other. But consider two other people who always have each other in mind, so much so that they will be in lifetime after lifetime as inseparable as a man and his shadow. In his analogy here, for example, there are two people. One person has a very good memory. He remembers everything perfectly clearly. The other person forgets things very easily. For these two people, regardless of whether they cross paths or not, whether they meet or not, or whether they catch sight of each other or not, because one person has a particularly good memory and remembers everything perfectly clearly, while the other person forgets things in an instant, constantly forgetting. But if these two people, regardless of whether they see each other or not, cross paths or not, if they both actually keep each other deeply in mind, the one with the good memory tries his best to think of the other, and the one with the poor memory pays even more attention to remember. If they mutually act this way, then these two people, in reality, will be as inseparable as a person and his shadow. Lifetime after lifetime, never being apart is possible for them. So in the analogy below, the person with the good memory is like the Buddha, and the one with the poor memory represents as sentient beings. If sentient beings never think of the Buddha, even though the Buddha, day and night, during the 6 periods of the day and night, is always keeping you in mind, always caring for you, it is still of no use. However, if the person with the poor memory also constantly complies with him, then whether they catch sight of each other or not, they will still have the opportunity to be inseparable like a form and its shadow. They have this opportunity. This is the first analogy. Then the second analogy. Similarly, the thus come ones in all 10 directions think of all beings with compassion, just as a mother always thinks of her child. If the child were to run away from home, the mother's thinking of him will be of no use. But if the child is mindful of the mother, just as she is of him, the two will be inseparable in lifetime after lifetime. He says, as for the thus come ones of the 10 directions, their mindfulness and caring for sentient beings are the same, just like a mother who deeply misses and remembers her own child. But if her child ignores the mother, and he runs away, if he escapes, then no matter how much the mother thinks of him, there is nothing that can be done. If this child also remembers the mother, just as the mother remembers the child, if he is mindful of her in this way, then the mother and child, lifetime after lifetime, will be constantly without separation. They will have this opportunity. These two analogies, one is the analogy of two people, and the other is the analogy of the mother and child. Then it says below, beings who are always mindful of the Buddha, always thinking of the Buddha, are certain to see the Buddha now or in the future. For our Buddha, there is certainly no problem. The Buddha is just like the mother. The Buddha is like the person with the good memory mentioned earlier. He deeply values this connection. He is constantly thinking of us. And that mother is also always thinking of her child. But if the child doesn't think of her at all, the mother can do nothing. Although the person with the good memory remembers, if the person with the poor memory completely ignores him, there's nothing that can be done either. If sentient beings are also like that mischievous child, if they want to be mindful of the Buddha at all times, always remembering and being mindful of the Buddha, frequently reciting the Buddha's name verbally and always keeping the Buddha in their thoughts, visualizing the Buddha, then they are certain to see the Buddha now or in the future. Right now, in the present moment, or in the future, they will certainly be able to see him. So nowadays in the Pure Land school, these analogies are often referenced by many great masters. Everyone should be aware of this. They will never be far from Buddhas, and their minds will awaken by themselves without any special effort. At this time, they will not be very far from the Buddha. They do not need to rely on other expedient methods, and they will naturally attain an awakened mind. In a very short time, relying on the blessings and visualization of remembering and being mindful of the Buddha, they will attain enlightenment in a very short time. Just as people who have been in the presence of incense will naturally smell sweet, such people may be said to be adorned with fragrance and light. Just like people who are steeped in incense, their bodies will surely carry a fragrant scent. By the same principle, for the person who frequently practices mindfulness of the Buddha's blessings will surely imbue them. What is this called? Being adorned with fragrance and light. For example, if we chant the heart mantra of Avalokiteshvara every day, Om Mani Padme Hum, it's just like a person steeped in incense every day. They will carry that fragrance wherever they go. By the same principle, every day, actually truly, our continuous familiarization is very important. If we don't cultivate this familiarization ourselves, if we just act indifferent, lacking respect for the Buddha, lacking respect for the Guru, and acting the same way toward our Dharma friends, then it will be very difficult for us to receive the blessings of the three jewels. If you constantly apply diligent effort, making this kind of effort actually, this continuous familiarization is crucial. As long as everyone doesn't give up, for example, whether it's your connection with Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara, I feel that we have a very strong affinity with Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara. We also have a strong affinity with Bodhisattva Manjushri. Today it seems that many of the teachings later on are all connected with Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara and Amitabha Buddha. They are all integrated together. It is very likely that if anyone passes away this year, these people should all be reborn in the land of ultimate bliss. Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara might welcome them. It is possible. So if anyone passes away this year, it means they should simply depart with a joyful heart.
可能谁都不愿意走。今年不是的话，明年多低也无所谓。
Here he mentions adorned with fragrance and light from earlier. Adorned with fragrance and light, it seems there is a Tibetan translation for this. This person who frequently practices mindfulness of the Buddha receives the Buddha's blessings. This is called being adorned with fragrance and light. Then below here, Bodhisattva Great Strength says this: the basis of my practice was mindfulness of the Buddha. I became patient with the state of mind in which no mental objects arise. When I was at the causal stage, actually through mindfulness of the Buddha, mindfulness of Amitabha Buddha, visualizing Amitabha Buddha in my mind, through this, I attained the patience of non-arising phenomena. I entered the samadhi of the patience of non-arising phenomena. Now when people of this world are mindful of the Buddha, I act as their guide to lead them to the Pure Land. So today, in this world of Shakyamuni Buddha, I also encourage many people to abandon their worldly thoughts and practice mindfulness of this Buddha, abandoning them or gathering themselves to be mindful of this. Some interpret this as gathering those who are mindful of this Buddha, and then guiding these people who practice mindfulness of the Buddha to the Pure Land, to be reborn in the land of ultimate bliss. Finally, the Buddha has asked us how we broke through to enlightenment. In order to enter samadhi, I chose no other method than to gather in the 6 faculties, while continuously maintaining a pure mindfulness of the Buddha. This is the best method. If the Buddha asks me about this perfect penetration, I would have no other choice. I feel that gathering in all 6 faculties is just this continuous pure mindfulness of the Buddha. Whether it is physical mindfulness or wisdom, overall we call it single-minded mindfulness of the Buddha, focused mindfulness of the Buddha, delving deeply into one approach. Many great masters of the Pure Land school also have many pith instructions. Actually, if we verbally recite the Buddha's name, the mind will definitely be mindful of the Buddha. If the mouth does not recite, it is also very difficult for the mind to be mindful. So, if this continuous mindfulness of the Buddha is uninterrupted, actually this is attaining the samadhi of mindfulness of the Buddha. So in this way, for me, this should be the primary element of perception, is the most important understanding, the most important method for attaining rebirth or studying a very important Dharma gate. This is the best method. Now this volume is completely finished. Tomorrow we will move on to the 6th volume below.
Bandharangara Padma Sadar